Okay, so what we're going to do in this video is we're going to talk about how to get lag and how you're going to then use that lag and whip it through the golf ball. And I wanted to do this video because I tend to find that a lot of students that I meet, they get the wrong idea. They get the wrong idea about how to square the club face. They get the wrong idea of a lot of where your energy comes from. So I thought, let's create a video on lag, whipping it through the golf ball, and hopefully it'll help lots of you out, as I know that sort of discussion helps students of mine out as well. Now, I think the best way to understand this is to do some single-handed swings. So I'm going to first of all talk about the lead hand, then I'm going to talk about the trail hand, and then we'll sort of talk about how to put those two things very much into unison together. Now, when I hold the club with the lead hand, I will obviously, like all of you guys, rotate my lead hand over, put the club somewhere in the fingers. I kind of grip it in the fingers and towards the palm, like so. So there's a difference between where my lead arm is positioned and where the club shaft is positioned, like that. Okay, so my lead hand rotates over to the point where I can see about 3 knuckles, and I hold the club as I mentioned. So now, as I'm holding the club, I have the ability to create this wrist cocking motion, which is like so. Okay, now what will happen in the backswing position is my lead arm is going to do a couple of things. It's going to lift up in the air and it's going to come across my chest. So as I do both of those, I should try and emulate a backswing position where my lead arm, my left arm, is pretty much going through my shoulder line. So at the top of the backswing, can you see the way the club shaft is pointing down towards my target line, or it's parallel towards my inclined plane, which is like this. And that's kind of what we're looking for, okay? Now, from this perspective, we can also see this angle here, this sort of 90-degree angle between my lead arm and the club shaft. Now, a lot of golfers are assuming that using the wrist like this is a bad thing to do. I don't think that's a fair thing to say. I would say, based on the correct grip and your understanding of where to be, this type of motion should happen pretty naturally. But I also meet a lot of people that are trying to take that away. They're literally sort of consciously swinging back, not doing that because that's what they thought was the correct thing to do. That's why, first of all, creating lag is that relationship. And lag's important because that's where your speed comes from. That. If I take that away, you hear the difference. Okay, so that's your whipping motion. Now, what we do see with some professional golfers is they will have flexion. And if I flex, it takes away some of the ability to create wrist cock. And that's okay, because obviously if you're the kind of golfer who arguably maybe has enough distance and you don't need to try and maximize that, then there's an element of logic to do that. But I wouldn't necessarily advocate it for most amateurs. I tend to think like consciously flattening wrist positions and stuff just tends to manipulate with the club face, and golfers are doing it for all the wrong sort of reasons. So once you have the left arm position sorted in the backswing, then what we now need to do is direct it. And the way you're going to direct your lead arm is a lot to do with obviously the rotation of your body. So as I rotate both my lower and my chest progressively towards the target, it moves the shoulder. And as my shoulder moves around, that's going to influence basically the direction of this hand. So if you're somebody who kind of doesn't rotate very well, that's why the club ends up being dumped back here somewhere, as opposed to whipping it through. So if you were to do some swings, lead hand only, which I do encourage a lot of my students to do, you are trying to look for two things. One, you're trying to just get a nice feeling of the backswing position, that you're setting the club nicely, and then from here, you're really just trying to turn through. Now, the one thing that I wanted to just talk about as well, however, this is dependent on a couple of things. One, the amount of chest rotation you possess, and two, your grip type, okay? So this isn't a must for every golfer. But similar to when I spoke about the backswing position and getting the club on plane, if I now flip that round so you guys are on my target, what should happen is the club should look again something like so, where the club shaft is either pointing down towards your target line or it's parallel towards your inclined plane. If you grip the golf club very strong, you won't look that way. You'll always look a little bit more like the club's being held off. And if you don't have great chest rotation, you won't look that way either. So if you're somebody who's a bit slow in the old chest rotation, you'll notice your arms will pull up as opposed to somebody who can turn their chest. But like I say, if you are somebody, which is I would say 98% of golfers, who has a normal to strong grip, you should be consciously swinging on plane and swinging on plane. The general notion that you shouldn't use your arms in the golf swing, which gets sort of talked about to some degree in the golf swing instructional world, I just don't agree with. I just think it's oversimplified, and too many amateurs take that as literal and they stop moving their arms, and that's why everything just sort of falls apart. So Lead arm, you hold the club, you grip the club, you move it up and across your chest, you move it through and across your chest, but obviously in the downswing it's more about propelling the chest through, and that propels the arm off the chest, which is going to give you that sense of whipping the club through. Now, that's pretty much it. The question would be, well, what is this hand doing? Well, this hand is basically just playing a bit of a supporting role. So in the backswing position, it'll just sort of help you get the club into a decent position. As you initiate the downswing, what you want to do is focus on your upper arm moving down towards the side of the body like so. And then as you swing through, again, you want to feel like it's helping roll through. I think the bigger thing here is if you did some lead hand only swings, what you want to do is just make sure your trail hand isn't doing anything to hurt that liberty and liberation of that lead arm. So what I mean by that is if you're somebody who, you know, as you start the downswing, pulls down with the forearm, then that's going to send the club off in the wrong direction. So a nice way of thinking about it is in the backswing, your trail hand is almost just like the old tray, the waiter with a tray of drinks analogy, where it's just helping support the weight of that club. And then really as it swings through, it's almost like your trail hand's just desperately trying to keep up as it releases on that direction in the through swing. So if you're going to do some trail hand only swings, then equally what you want to do is just rotate nicely. Get the feeling in the backswing that you're like the waiter tray of drinks who's just helping keep that club on plane. And then as you start the downswing, you've got to move this upper arm to the side of the body as you whip it through, okay? But again, what's important is when you're doing some lead hand only swings and some trail hand only swings, you still want to be concentrating on one, swinging pretty freely, but two, try and control your low point. The biggest thing that most amateur golfers don't do is spend enough time on, which I'm doing with a lot of students now, is just getting them to strike the ground in the same place. If you do that, you will notice a big difference over time. So how you're going to whip the club through and how you're going to create lag is very much a function of grip, understanding swing plane, and just trying to do nothing that's going to jeopardize that, which is, you know, consciously trying to do something funky with the wrist positions, which is just completely unnecessary. See you soon.